So we're going to be bleeding the brakes on this 2005 Honda Pilot. We know that there's air in the system because all the fluid from the master cylinder drained out. We left one of the bleeder screws open and all the fluid came out, so we know that there's air in all four of the brake lines. So there's actually an order to bleed the wheels, or bleed the brakes. It starts with the driver's side front, then the passenger side front, then the passenger side rear, and then the driver's side rear. So it's kind of like a C shape, starting at the driver's side wheel and goes around the car and ends in that wheel. So if you look on the cap of the master cylinder reservoir, you can see it says use only .3, which is the most common, or .4, which is usually a little bit more expensive than .3, but .3 is the most common. So make sure you pick up lots of brake fluid before you start this job. It's about $6 for the big bottles, and we'll be going through a lot. So before you start, make sure you put as much as you can into the reservoir just to top everything off. So we're gonna save the old brake fluid here because it's very corrosive and is really good for cleaning parts. So we'll pour this all into this bottle. This is actually an old strawberry banana bottle. This stuff was like amazing. It was phenomenal. So to start, we're gonna be using this one-man bleeding system, which is this bottle that has a tube that goes all the way down to the bottom of the bottle. So when the brake fluid reaches the bottom, it traps all the air and it won't come back in. And then we'll attach the other end of the hose to the bleeder screw, and then you can pump the brake and it'll flow through into the bottle. So here's the bleeder screw. We've made sure all the other ones are broken loose. So this one we can now take off and start bleeding the brakes. We can go ahead and put a wrench on the bleeder screw, and then we can put the end of the hose on the bleeder screw as well, and then we can break it loose and then have an assistant pump the brakes. So it is pretty tight on there, so I'm able to just take another wrench, get more leverage, and then it should break right loose. There we go. And now we can bleed the brakes. So now we have the magnet stuck above the bleeder screw so that the air will really get trapped in there. With the one-man bleeder system, we're able to leave the valve open and just pump the brake. So now we're pumping the brake, and with this clear hose, you're able to see if there's any air in the system, and just keep pumping the brake until the bottle fills up, and that's good. And now we'll dump the bottle and do it again until we have all the air out. Now that the bottle's all full, I'll unscrew it and then dump it into a container that we have right here. So then just repeat this process until all the air is out. And it looks like this line is pretty good, so we can move on to the next wheel. Before we move on to the other wheel, we're going to do the two-man method for bleeding. And the person on the inside will pump the brake and hold it all the way at the end. And then we'll open the valve, and then it'll bleed in, we'll close it, and then we'll open it. Then they'll let their foot off the brake, and then we'll open it, and then they'll push down. You'll get the hang of it whenever we start. Whenever you dump the fluid out, it's always a good idea to just leave a little bit of fluid in the bottom to cover the hose so that air will stay trapped. So with the valve closed, we're gonna go ahead and pump up the brakes.
Okay.
So now,
There's pressure, I'm holding.
now that we're holding the pressure, the pedal is all the way to the floor, we're going to release the valve, loosen it, and we should see all the fluid start flowing. And now, with the pedal still held, we're going to tighten it back up. And now you can release the pedal.
Okay, release.
So now we'll repeat this step because we did see a little bit of air come out. So we're going to keep doing that until all the air is gone. So go ahead and pump up the brake.
Okay, pumping. And holding now.
Okay, now I'll loosen the valve. Saw a little bit more air there. I'll put that back up, and then I'll go ahead and tighten up the bleeder screw. Okay, you can let off the brake. Okay, Okay, go ahead and pump the brakes.
Okay, pumping. And holding.
Okay, I'll loosen the bleeder screw. Okay, and I'll tighten it. Okay, you can go ahead and take your foot off.
Okay, my foot's off.
So now we'll do it one more time, or at least until all the air is out. So go ahead and pump the brakes.
Okay, pumping. And holding.
Okay, release the bleeder screw, and now I'll tighten it back up. Okay, you can take your foot off the brake.
Okay, foot's off the brake.
Okay, go ahead and pump the brakes.
Pumping. And holding.
Okay, now I'll loosen the bleeder screw. You can see there's just a very minuscule amount of air in there. Now I'll tighten it up. Okay, you can release.
Okay, release.
So now we'll do it again. Go ahead and pump the brakes.
Pumping. And holding.
Okay, now I release the bleeder screw. This time I see just about only one bubble. Now I'll tighten it back up. Okay, you can go ahead and release.
Release.
So we got all the air out and it's much better now, and you can see I did knock the fluid container over. Now there's like brake fluid everywhere. It's kind of a pain now. So it took us about 30 times on that wheel, but the entire time you're doing this, just always watch and always be topping off the reservoir, because if this gets too low, you're gonna have to redo everything. We'll make sure to empty this out because we don't want it to spill again. So this is wheel number 2, which is the passenger side front. And this is going to be the one-man bleeder system just to get a majority of the air out. So I'm going to just loosen the bleeder screw and then go ahead and pump the brakes. And now we'll just pump the brakes a few times and just let the fluid run through, and then we can close the valve. So when we loosen the bleeder screw, you can go ahead and pump the brake. We're able to keep pumping the brake for a long time, and you can see all that air is just coming out of here, and that is a really good sign. I think that means we're getting a lot of the air out, and this line was just full of air. And we can just leave it open and keep pumping, and then once we get the majority of the air out, then we can do the 2-man bleeder system. So now we'll keep doing the 1-man method, and go ahead and pump. And we'll just keep pumping until we get all that air out. You can see there's still air in the system, and this is still getting air out. Okay, bottle's full. Whenever you're using the 1-man bleeder system, it's a good idea to put brake or just grease around the bleeder nipple, because that is a point where it can fail and air can get in and start introducing air, and that's something that doesn't happen with the 2-man bleeder system. But if you pat grease around it, there's no way for the air to get in. So we've got most of the air out with the 1-man system, and now we can switch to the 2-man. Now what some people will do is they'll just do the 1-man system and bleed all the air out that way. But I like to do the 2-man system because I get the confidence to know that the bleeder screw isn't failing and letting air in, and I know I'll get all the air out. So let's go ahead and pump the brake.
Pumping. And holding.
Okay, I'll go ahead and loosen that and tighten it up. Okay, go ahead and pump the brake again.
Holding.
Now we'll loosen that again and tighten it up. Okay, go ahead and pump it up again.
Holding.
Here we go, you saw air come out that time. And I'll tighten it back up. Go ahead and pump it up.
Holding.
Okay, go ahead and pump it up. So there definitely was a lot of air in this one, but we just got it all out. And in the front, we used probably about 1.5 bottles of brake fluid. Now let's move on to Now we're here on the passenger rear. And I have a little bit more room here. I'm not under the car. I'm actually able to sit here, and then I have this sitting here. So we'll be able to just bleed the brakes like this. And the new bleeder valve that we put in, I think sure turns a lot easier than the old ones. This is really nice and shiny. So I just put some grease around the nipple, and just as an extra precaution to make sure air doesn't get in. I'm not quite confident enough to just do the one-man system. We still want to do the two-man system. If anybody out there knows how to do it or has any other tips on just the one-man system, just leave a comment. We'd love to hear about it. The only way to break these bleeders loose is with a 9mm or a socket. This just so happens to be a 9mm. It feels like it's about to fit on, but it doesn't quite. So this just kind of tap it on. Not too much, and also you want to be careful not to break off the end of the bleeder screw. We did that on the other wheel. So now we'll just try breaking it loose. There we go. That one came off. This one is already kind of loose. Now we can take that off and then wiggle it off this way. There we go. So let's go ahead and put this on, the tube, and unfortunately the magnet just isn't strong enough on this, so we'll have to glue a stronger magnet on. But now we can go ahead and do the one-man bleeding method. So let's put a little bit of grease around the nipple or the bleeder screw here so that air won't be able to suck back in, so that you won't be introducing air at the bleeder, because sometimes it does fail here. So with the grease packed around there, we're able to put this back on, break it loose, and do the one-man method. The magnet is a great idea, like you could just stick it to the spring, but it's not nearly strong enough to be able to hold a whole bottle of brake fluid in there. It just kind of barely sticks on, so we'll have to glue a stronger magnet on. Now we'll go ahead and loosen up the bleeder screw, and go ahead and pump the brakes. And you can see all that air is coming out, and we're really getting all that air out of the system. So once all that air gets out, you'll see the brake fluid starting to run up to the bottle. Okay. Now we're seeing a lot less air in the system. If we look closely at the pipe, we've been pumping it a few times, and I'm not seeing any air flowing through here. So I think it's okay. So I just filled up another whole bottle, and I didn't see any air go through the tube, so we know we have all the air out. Now we have everything down on the ground, and we can go ahead and take it for a test drive and see how well it works. Okay, so now it seems like it stops well. The brakes seem to be functioning properly, and